Today's episode of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast is brought to you by King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry, Bavarian Grill, and Ye Olde Butcher Shop. King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry, a longtime retail and repair shop for, you guessed it, clocks and jewelry. Everything from grandfather clocks to mantle clocks, wall clocks. Hey, if you just need to get the battery in your watch replaced, King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry has you covered. Not only that, they are also a gold and silver exchange. So if you have any gold coins, silver coins that you're looking to trade in for cash on the spot, King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry has you covered there as well. They are located at 1201 North Central Expressway, having served Plano for over 30 years. King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry. And now, let's podcast. Welcome to another edition of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch. I'm the sports editor at Star Local Media, and I am being joined by Brian Murphy, sports editor for the Frisco Enterprise, Little Elm Journal, and Salina Record, as well as Justin Thomas, who is the sports editor for our Denton County papers. You know, Justin, I always refer to you as the sports editor for our Denton County papers. I don't think people actually realize, though, what that entails. So it is, correct me if I miss anybody.
Okay.
Carrollton, Coppell, Lewisville, Flower Mound, The Colony.
Correct.
That's it? That's it.
That's all you got?
Only 5. So, welcome to another edition of the podcast. So we're here to answer some questions. So one of the, and I've mentioned it in previous podcasts, one of the more frequent questions that we are asked is, what do we do during the summer? Because school's out, there's not a whole lot going on, so how do we find a way to fill newspaper space? Still got to find a way to put out papers, so how do we stay busy? So a few years ago, one thing that we did to try and help fill space and just provide market relevant content during a time when school's out is we came up with what was called a questions series, and that was basically, it started off as 66 questions for District 66A, and that was just as it sounds. We came up with 66 questions just to kind of create just this really overly comprehensive preview for the upcoming school year for that particular district. I mean, we touch on every single sport, every single storyline, just about every angle that you can think of to tackle the district in advance of the upcoming school year. So and the project has kind of evolved. We do question series now for several of our districts and several of our markets. So, but obviously it's a newspaper. We only have a finite amount of space to fit stuff into a newspaper. So what I was thinking though for the podcast is we take a couple questions that we're going to be rolling with each week, and then we just kind of, some of the more open-ended questions, and then we bring them to this forum here, and then just have a bit of a more open-ended discussion about them, and just kind of see where that goes. For this week, the two questions that I wanted to focus on are actually one that's going to be in this week, and then another that ran last week. But let's start with looking at some winners and losers of some of these these new district alignments. Realignment was a ways back, but we've had time to let this all kind of sink in, kind of explore these districts beyond just football, but how do they stack up just across all sports. And as we get ready for the 2018-19 school year, certainly the forecast for some teams are going to be a bit different than in years past. So Justin, whether it's regardless of what district you want to roll with, just talk about just some winners and losers from the districts that you cover.
I guess I'll start with District 85A, and I guess for this exercise, we're talking more of the non-football sports. It's really confusing, these new multiple districts in
when you get to the 5A. Whole Division 1, Division 2, 5A split, and how the football district is nowhere near the same as the other sports. Correct, so 85A is the one that has Lake Dallas, The Colony, Little Elm, Denton ISD, Justin Northwest.
Correct, yeah. For non-football.
For non-football.
But I guess just kind of looking at kind of the new homes for some of the teams we cover in those markets, Little Elm, The Colony, the CFB teams that are all kind of in different districts, and from what I'm looking at, it seems like kind of things might have got tougher for kind of everyone. Prosper is going up to 6A, and you would think that might make things easier for Colony, Little Elm, those teams, because Prosper just dominated that district, winning every district title. So maybe some of these teams have a better chance of winning a district title this year, but in terms of the overall kind of depth of the district, I think it kind of got a little tougher for everybody, having to face some of these other teams instead of, no offense to the Carrollton schools, but they had a couple down years in 14 5A, and, the overall depth of the conference, there's not as many teams that you can quote unquote maybe
the floor of the district definitely elevated.
And then if you take a sport like basketball, boys basketball, that district is really tough. Because granted, we had Prosper and Little Elm and The Colony, 3 really good teams. 2 of them were state ranked. But then you have Justin Northwest, a team that made it to state. They were undefeated in their district. You have Denton Ryan won their district. Denton made the playoffs. I think they won 10 or 12 games or something like that. And then if you're throwing Little Elm, and then The Colony, who's always a playoff team in basketball. So one of those teams is going to get left out. in that district in boys basketball, for example. So that's going to be one thing that'll be fun to watch.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Carrollton schools, and that's, but that is a fair point, because that was, over the course of a 14-game district schedule, that's 6 games. That's almost half of your schedule. That, for the most part, a lot of these, your McKinney Norris, Prospers, the Colonies, Lake Dallas, they could just tack on. They just knew they were assured 6 wins. And
you don't want to throw too much shade at the CFB schools, but you got to call it what it is. And in a majority of the sports, they were the 6th, 7th, and 8th place teams in that district. So,
but it's like you said. I think the floor just kind of elevates that. You're not really sure, kind of going in, who the true power is, sport to sport. But it does feel like you could see a different order of finish just about across the board. Whereas 14-5A was pretty much dominated by 5 teams in just some different order with each sport.
But then to continue with the CFB teams, it didn't get any easier for them. They're in, especially in football, they're in this district with Ryan and Denton, Colleyville Heritage, Birdville, Grapevine. Those are traditionally strong teams.
It's a murderer's row. It's
probably got even tougher for them, especially in football. So tough break there.
How about over in 6-6A with the Lewisville ISD?
Yeah, I would say that I've kind of, throughout looking at this series kind of early, you don't want to kind of equate 2 teams together, but when you look at kind of the all-around athletic programs at Coppell and Carroll, they're 2 very good all-around programs. Maybe Carroll has the edge in a couple sports, especially swimming and some sports like that.
Yeah.
But for the sake of this exercise, I feel like that's kind of a pretty lateral switching Carroll for Coppell in terms of just the competitive balance of the district. Yeah. But then outside of that, when you take away Byron Nelson and Trinity and Bell and swap them for the Irving programs, I think that makes life a lot easier for the Lewisville teams. I think you'll see more Lewisville programs getting into the playoffs. Byron Nelson, I didn't know a whole lot about them prior to this 2-year run they had, but they're pretty good.
Northwest ISD in general is on the come up.
Getting those, and the Irving schools, they had good runs in soccer. I know Irving MacArthur's usually pretty good at basketball, especially girls, but outside of that, they didn't really do too much. I think they made the playoffs in 2 sports, maybe. It
could look very similar to what 14-5A has been these last couple of years.
Irving could be the new Carrollton schools.
They could kind of take over that kind of those lower rung teams, and I think that's going to benefit LISD. And then I think for Coppell, you have to kind of look at them outside of kind of what it means competition-wise. It's got to be fun just to get back in a district with some programs that you're used to kind of being rivals with and playing with. And I know they're looking forward to being back in Region 1 and not having to deal with all these second-round playoff games in Waco and stuff.
We're really just bearing the lead because the big winner in all this is you, because that district alone covers 4 of your papers.
Yes, 1 less district, more games. So I think I guess it's a winner for you guys too, because you'll get to see more live coverage of Coppell and more comprehensive stuff instead of more crossover stuff, I guess.
For what I did for this question is I focus more on just kind of individual teams, and just some different as far as winners and losers go. Like I think Lake Dallas football came out a big winner with just the Division 1, Division 2 split in 5A, just because they had success in 14-5A last season. They finished second. They got to the second round of the playoffs, but just from a sheer numbers standpoint, and this is always going to be the case with Lake Dallas, they were so far and away the smallest school in that district. They were the only school from that, from 14-5A that dropped down to Division 2 for the, for the D1, D2 split. I was just going back and checking through the enrollment figures for the 8 schools that are in 14-5A. 7 out of 8 had enrollments of, let's see, what was it? Enrollments of at least 1,940 students.
Lake Dallas had almost 1,000.
Lake Dallas is 1,260.
Yeah. It's nuts.
So you consider that almost a 700 student disparity from the next smallest school in that district.
Really, everyone in that football district is a winner, though, because if you look, you have teams like Princeton making the move from 4A. Well, they're going into, I wouldn't say an easier district in 5A, but a team with a lot smaller enrollments, so they're not jumping into some mega district. And then you have a team that struggled last year in Frisco, a couple new teams in Lebanon Trail and Memorial. So it's like they're easing into 5A and not just getting thrown right into the fire. So really, everyone in that district is a winner.
Yeah,
Denton Broswell, they haven't really had any success in their first 2 years. in football, but they're kind of easing into this district too. So it's really everyone's a winner, honestly.
Lovejoy, Reedy. I mean, Reedy would show that they could swing with the heavyweights in Frisco ISD, and now they get dropped down to a classification where they're, one of the most, they on paper right now, one of the best in that district. So yeah, I think you can make a case that Lake Dallas football came out smelling all nice and rosy after realignment. Another team that I think benefits from I guess switching regions or whatever, being in a not a different district but in a different region more so, is Plano Senior softball. Not softball, I should say baseball. Softball's awesome. Softball just went to state. So Plano Senior baseball, they have not won a playoff game since 2014 when they went to the regional finals. What also happened that year is that was their last year in Region 2. Well, Region 2 is right where they're at right now, where they're going to be at for these next 2 years at least. So in the time since those 4 years back in Region 1, they went one and done all 4 years. They finished 4th place in the district all 4 years, which to some extent they have control over that part at least where they finish. Although this year they tied for 2nd place, won 9 district games, and still wound up being the 4 seed after losing a seeding game. But here's what they've had to go through in the first round. 2015 against Keller. Keller went on to play in the regional finals that year. 2016, Keller again. Keller went 4 rounds deep that season. And then these past 2 years, Southlake Carroll. Last year, Southlake went to the state semifinals. This year, Southlake is back in the state semifinals. So, just bad luck from a draw standpoint. So you would think that being back in Region 2, and again, nothing's a certainty, but you got to think the odds of getting out of that first round increase exponentially when you're looking across the way at that Garland ISD district versus having to play a juggernaut, a guaranteed juggernaut like they have these past 4 years. And also another winner was just for 9-6A, just the boys basketball and softball teams, because obviously when you look at this new district, you axed Wiley and Denton Geyer. You replace them with Prosper and Jesuit. Well, boys basketball and softball, Geyer and Wiley occupied 2 playoff spots in each. So you could see fairly different landscapes there. 2 quality programs are going to be out, especially Geyer boys basketball, which was just, they ran roughshod over 6-6A their 2 years there.
Not exactly slouches stepping in, though.
No. But you would think, though, that at least it definitely opens up more of a, there's a little bit more of I especially think in boys basketball, just when you know that you're not going to have what's going to be most likely the number 1 ranked team in the state next season to contend with twice, throughout the course of your district schedule. It definitely does give you a little bit more breathing room.
And you could think Prosper could be a loser going into such a tough district, going from 5A, in that district with the Carrollton schools, and now you're going with Allen and literally the biggest schools in the state of Texas in the Plano ISDs. But really, I think they're going to be a big winner. They played a lot of 6A teams in almost every sport in their non-district schedule, like in baseball, softball, boys basketball, girls basketball, all sports where they were state ranked in the top 10 in 5A. I think they're going to be a major winner in this district. Of course, they might struggle a little bit against Allen and stuff like that in certain sports, but I think they can make the playoffs or be a district title contender in almost every sport.
I have them down as a loser.
Why?
And it's because it cannot get any better than it is right now for them. It literally cannot.
They just won 8 district titles.
You win 8 district titles. You went.
They won a state championship.
Yeah, we'll talk more about Prosper later on, but it literally cannot get any better right now than it is for them. So just by default, it's going to be much tougher on them. And to be fair, same as Jesuit, because Jesuit was coming from I guess the original 9-6A or whatnot with with Coppell and a lot of the Richardson ISD schools. But that was a district that I think for the most part was pretty. Did they make the playoffs in all 4 boys sports?
Jesuit, because they did rally and they did,
So it seems like they're going to a district where there's far more parity, far more balance, and it would be. They still should be solid on all 4 of those, but it's tough to really say for sure that they're going to have they'll make the playoffs with the same regularity that they did in 9-6A.
We might get to check out Emmett Smith's son in action this year.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Some of our teams.
Checked him out last year. He's pretty fun.
What game was that you?
Coppell.
Oh, nice.
And then I had one more loser written down. This is
line for a touchdown.
This is
the entire line.
Yeah, I think pretty much.
This is kind of an off the beaten path pick for another loser with this realignment, but Plano West Tennis, which is weird because Plano West Tennis is about as credentialed a program as there is in the state. They are 5-time state champions. They've been to the state tournament 8 consecutive years, 16 years overall. They won the whole thing in 2016, but of all of the
got to deal with Memorial and stuff now.
Of all of the not Memorial, but literally every other team that made state, of all of the shuffling that went through the through regions and realignment and whatnot, tennis just consolidated just about all the power into Region 2. Yeah. So like I said, they won't have to worry about state champion Memorial, but they're now in the same region as Cypress Ranch, which was the team that beat Plano West last year in the state semifinals, a very young tennis program, as well as Austin Vandegrift, who was the the other state semifinalist. So you're potentially, and that's on top of being in the same district as Allen, which made the regional finals out of in Region 1 last year, Round Rock Westwood, which was a regional finalist in Region 2. So it's not even a lock that you get to the regional finals in this district with just how heavily weighted Region 2 is. So Plano West has been to state 8 straight years, but they're going to have to earn every last ounce of that potential 9th trip to the state if they're able to bring that to fruition. Brian, did you have any other winners or losers from your districts that you wanted to throw out there?
9-5A, the 10-team Frisco district in non-football sports, I think they're all winners. Especially, you could say that Memorial and Lebanon Trail are losers, making the jump to these Frisco schools, but I think they're all winners. You get, whether you like the expansion of all these Frisco high schools or not, I think it's cool, to have 10 teams all from the same city. It builds little rivalries within rivalries. Everyone knows each other. I think that can be a lot of fun.
They're going to run out of mascots though after a while.
I know.
So then let's see. We can we've got another question on the docket. We're going to focus more so on a couple programs that have made we've already alluded to a couple of these programs that are making the jump either up a classification or making a dramatic shift region-wise, and we are going to pick that up after a word from the sponsor. Today's Student Athlete Spotlight is brought to you by Bavarian Grill, authentic Bavarian food and beer garden. Listed by the Zagat survey as the highest rated German restaurant in Texas for 12 years in a row. 12 years! That's 3 presidential terms. You can enjoy traditional and authentic spring favorites now, everything from appetizers like slow roasted ham hock and potato pancakes to entrees like bratwurst or breaded schnitzel. Bring your whole family for lunch and dinner. They are open Tuesday through Saturday, located off Parker and Highway 75 in Plano. Bavarian Grill. And now, let's get back to the podcast. And let's round out the podcast with a look at another question that we're going to offer up throughout our summer-long question series. We actually did a version of this last week in the first week of these questions, but looking at a couple programs that are going up a classification and shifting over a region. As far as I wanted to kind of focus this one mainly on Coppell and Prosper, since it feels like their athletic landscapes change pretty dramatically relative to most of the other schools that we cover. Brian, we've already talked a little bit about Prosper, but I think Prosper is just, I cannot stress this enough, just such a fascinating subplot, how a program that is, again, having about as, 2017-18 is about as, that's like a pantheon year for Prosper athletics.
Could not have been more dominant in,
athletics.
Yeah, we've already mentioned, they won the district title in all 8 of your bracket sports.
There was one sport where they had to share the district title, was with Little Elm and boys basketball, but that's it. They dominated everything else, went undefeated in a lot of sports too. Girls soccer, softball, only lost 1 game in baseball. Yeah. But like what I was saying in the first segment is, for instance, in baseball, they play 6A teams, the Flower Mounds, the Lewisvilles, the South Lakes, in non-district play already each year, every year, and they dominate when it comes to 5A play. So I don't think they're going to have any problem, baseball, softball, literally every sport. I think they're going to be just fine. They're a powerhouse in girls soccer. They're losing head coach Rafael Flores, who's going to Frisco Memorial, but they're still going to be a powerhouse. Boys soccer, they're going to be good. Boys basketball, they returned some guys. Girls basketball still has Jordan Oliver, who played on the U16 girls basketball team, USA national basketball team last year. She's one of the best players in the state, a Baylor commit. They're going to be just fine in 6A. I don't see them, taking a major plunge. I'm not expecting 8 district titles,
that would be shocking.
But I'll still. Yeah, I didn't even mention Prosper volleyball that won state last year. So
the best of them all.
Yeah, so they'll be just fine.
One thing that kind of jumps at me as I look at kind of what to expect out of Prosper, and we've already talked about kind of how 14-5A was a very top-heavy district in some ways. I'm curious to see how Prosper kind of develops the consistency and intensity that it's going to take to handle a much more balanced district. I think there is something to be said for knowing that 6 of your 14 district games are probably not just wins, but fairly lopsided wins. Games where that you can go about 60% and know that you still are probably going to win pretty handily.
I think them not being in the same district as those Carrollton schools will actually help them. Especially in sports where they're already powerhouse teams, and like volleyball that you expect them to make the playoffs. It'll help them come playoff time.
Absolutely. If they make the playoffs, that's what people have said about these districts for years. Is that you talk to any of the softball coaches, and they'll just say, the reason we got so hot and we got so deep is just because we were prepared for this. There's nothing that these playoff teams could show us that we haven't seen already, because we've been playing playoff caliber opponents for months.
Well, that's a really good transition, because that's, I think, the biggest question surrounding Coppell going back to Region 1. Everybody, thought when they got shipped out to Region 2, like, oh, they're not going to have to play these teams early in the playoffs. It's going to be an easier path to get out, possibly to the state tournament being in Region 2 as opposed to Region 1. And that just didn't turn out to be the case. They still had good years. They still, made multiple rounds deep in most of the sports they traditionally do. But in terms of getting out to the state tournament, it just didn't happen as much outside of the boys soccer team this year. So is coming back to Region 1, is it going to hurt them being in a district lot like 9-6A where it's more night in, night out competition? Because for the most part, most sports, maybe there was one team that could challenge Coppell for the district title, but over the course of the season, they're pretty much just beating up on everybody. So when you're in a district like 6-6A with the Lewisville schools now, is that kind of night in competition? Is that gonna make things easier for them when they get to the playoffs, or is it's kind of a dichotomy that I'm really intrigued to see how it plays out.
I was looking at just kind of across the board. With what we know about kind of where Lewisville ISD is right now, would you feel like, I guess at least on paper, that Coppell, like the teams that made the playoffs last year, the heavy majority of them should probably still make it out of this district?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I would think that they're still capable of getting to the playoffs, but they're going to go into the playoffs having faced a much tougher schedule than they did in District 9-6A, and I'm wondering if that's, would you rather have an easy path and make sure you get in there, or would you rather be challenged more and maybe be more ready when you get there?
If you're a team like Coppell, I'd rather get challenged more, because you're already a powerhouse.
That's what I would think.
And the thing is, because I do think if you do see any area of Coppell moving back to Region 1 where it's really the effects are really going to set in, is that first round of the playoffs.
Yeah.
Because you look at what that district is right next to them for by-district competition.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh yeah, 5-6A with South Lake Carroll, Keller ISD, Denton Geyer, and then Northwest ISD. South Lake is South Lake. Keller has become one of the more well-rounded athletic programs in the state.
Yeah.
Depending on the sport, Geyer can be great.
Yeah.
Northwest, you already mentioned Byron Nelson, having seen them these past 2 years. So I think that would be where, and then if you get past that first round, then you're potentially looking at a matchup against like the Mansfield schools or DeSoto or Waxahachie out of 7-6A. So it's, I think that Region 1 is always going to be just an absolute bear.
Definitely.
But as they learned, Region 2 definitely had some, there's definitely some talent there. You just might see that talent a bit earlier in Region 1 than you would in Region 2.
If I'm a Coppell fan personally, I even though it may be tougher, I like this. I like seeing teams in the first and second rounds that you're more familiar with, that you know a little bit about. You don't have to travel as much to see them. You don't have these 3-game series of going to Houston and back here and then meeting in Waco, all that stuff. So I think they're going to enjoy it, even though it may be tougher in district. And if you're good and you make it out anyway, then that's going to be more fun anyway, having closer, more competitive games in district.
Wasn't Coppell having to travel for the second round games?
It was the second round games. They were facing, Woodlands teams and stuff a lot, and Conroe teams a lot in the second round, and a lot of those were taking place in Waco and stuff.
And now you wouldn't have to travel until the regional tournament, probably.
Ideally,
Yep, and a lot of that stuff is in like Arlington.
Exactly.
Versus, that's with one quick thing about with Prosper, Brian. I was just curious. Are there you feel like there's any one sport that Prosper you think is maybe best suited to kind of handle that transition to 6A? Anyone where you feel like their success is most likely to really carry over?
Volleyball or baseball?
Okay.
Baseball, like I've said twice already, they've been a state power, for the past handful of seasons, and they're the team that plays all the 6A schools. And volleyball coming off the state championship, I think they could be two teams that could battle the Allens and stuff for a state title or for a district title. I should
That
say.
volleyball district is going to be just an absolute gauntlet because you got rid of it's the sports that with losing Wiley and Geyer, it was a sport like volleyball where you could tell Wiley was just Wiley improved last year on at least on just from a quality of play standpoint, but that district was just they still went winless in district. It was just that difficult. So I'm anxious to kind of see because you had there were some results in that district last year that were just so up and down. You had, I think McKinney finished second to last, and they took Allen to 5 sets. That's the thing. When I just
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no. When I was just saying about just being able to maintain the intensity, just night to night, it's just so different because you literally do not have a spot to rest on that schedule.
Coach Kaufman, the Prosper head coach, told me last season, and some of the girls, actually it was some girls on the team told me, it wasn't Coach Kaufman, that against certain teams they had a certain quota they had to limit the opposing team to. Each set we have to keep them under 10 points or under 5 points.
That's what Coppell volleyball had to do a lot.
That's insane. Yeah, they won't be having that in 9-6A now. It's going to be, all right, we just have to win,
The 25-point serving runs.
Yeah.
You mentioned Jordan Oliver earlier, and we know how great she is, but that's another sport where it's going to be night in, night out as good as she could step on the court in 14-5A and almost, with the exception of when Jade Williams was at the Colony, almost assuredly be the best player on the floor at any time.
Now, who in 9-6A that's returning in girls basketball could be as good as her?
I'd say Plano Senior has one of the best girls basketball players to ever come through the school district in Jordan Merritt with Plano. She was she was an all-state player. She was their, she became their leading scorer over the back half of the season. She's just going to be a junior, but she has just the kind of, she's about, I want to say 6'2", but she's got as crafty a footwork as you'll see out of a kid that young. She can space the floor, shoot the threes, just plays lockdown defense. Her length is a hassle. She's going to be a nightmare to deal with. You have Nia Green, who transferred back to Allen. She's nationally ranked, a 5-star commit that committed to Louisville all the ways back. She's again 6'2", 6'3", just ridiculous court vision for a player that that young. And then you have the 2-time district offensive player of the year, Jade Nowens at Plano West, who could score 30 a night like that. There's going to be a lot of matchups where there's players that are of at least a comparable skill level to Jordan Oliver, which is not something that she had in 14-5.
Not at all. No.
I was actually going to mention, I know I don't cover Prosper to the degree you do, but I do get to see him some in 14-5, and I was going to suggest maybe softball is the sport that they could make the transition easiest.
See, the thing is, they're losing their pitcher, Rachel Acrote, and I don't know who's going to fill in those shoes and be top pitcher in the area.
It is a sport where if you get one transcendent player, it could carry the team, and they have a head coach that came from Prosper from Hebron, so she's used to coaching teams in powerhouse districts and how to get them ready for that competition on a nightly basis.
They have a good young offensive core too, so it's not like they're losing Rachel and they're losing a couple other key players, but they're returning a bulk of their team. So their softball team could be could compete well with.
Like I said previously, it also helps that Geyer and Wiley, 2 teams that made the playoffs out of 6-6A this past season, are now no longer in the district. So that does
for softball.
So you're going to have 2 brand new playoff teams in there regardless. So that does seem like a sport where the transition might come a little bit easier just because the talent level might not be the ceiling of the district might not be as high.
From top to bottom in each sport, which one do you think is more tough to play against, Prosper or Denton Geyer? With every sport factored in, it's hard to gauge because Prosper is so dominant in 14-5A in a completely different class.
Yeah, that's why this is going to be so interesting. How many times have we sat here, commenting games like, I wonder how, for instance, for me, the Colony softball team last year, that one state, I wonder how this team would have stacked up with the other Lewisville schools or in 6A. It's something I'm always curious about. Now we're going to get to see how Prosper makes the transition.
Should be good because Geyer's highs were so when you talk about boys basketball and football, them their best programs were good enough to hang with the the absolute best in the between from Plano ISD and
in 5A. So it'll be interesting to see.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's a look at some Coppell Prosper chatter, as those two programs have some very, very compelling athletic years ahead on the docket. Hey, that'll just about do it for this edition of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast. Brian, Justin, appreciate y'all for tagging along. We'll pick this thing back up on Monday with I guess we'll do more year in review stuff. We got 4 more markets that we're going to knock out and recap the athletics year that was. So make sure y'all are on hand to check that out. Otherwise, folks, hey, appreciate y'all checking out this podcast. Y'all enjoy the rest of your week. We will talk to y'all later. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast, brought to you by Ye Olde Butcher Shop, a meat market and burger joint based in Plano. It's summertime, folks. The temperatures are going to start heating up, and what a better way to break into that summer heat than to break out the grill, do some barbecuing. Well, guess what? Ye Olde Butcher Shop has you covered. They can help you with everything from catering, grilling, barbecuing, or any special occasion, serving the finest cuts of meat from everyday to exotics. They are located at 811 East 15th Street in Plano, open Tuesday through Saturday. A smoking good time since 1974, Ye Olde Butcher Shop.